If you're planning to travel to Germany this Easter weekend, make sure you're up to date on the latest restrictions on movement.
For millions of Christians, Easter is going to church, spending Easter Sunday with the whole family, maybe a walk, an Easter bonfire. For many, it's also a short vacation at the seaside in the south where it's already warmer, usually, but not this year.
With social contact already limited within Germany, the government's crisis group agreed on Monday to institute a 2-week quarantine for returnees. So who's affected? As of April 10th, all German nationals, EU citizens and other long-time residents who return to Germany after several days abroad have to quarantine themselves for 14 days. There are, however, exceptions. Seasonal workers in agriculture, commuters travelling to work, truck drivers delivering goods, and, of course, medical professionals. Restrictions for non-Germans and non-residents have already been in place since mid-March. Only those with a valid reason to travel can be admitted to Germany. For everyone else, the same message applies. It's time to stay at home.
DW political correspondent Hans Brandt joins me now from our parliamentary studio. Hans, Germany is increasing restrictions for residents entering the country, yet at the same time there have been discussions about how and when to start easing the lockdown. Is that not a contradiction?
Yes, on the face of it, there is a contradiction there. The numbers in Germany have been encouraging in the last few days. There are still increasing numbers of infected people, of sick people infected with the virus, but this increase is slowing down. So there is some sense that possibly in Germany the peak of this may have been overcome. But at the same time, the German authorities remain very concerned that the restrictions that have been in place remain in place, that people don't get the feeling that now that spring is coming, now that things seem to be looking a little bit more positive, that now that holidays are starting, school holidays and so on, now might be the time actually to leave their homes and to travel or whatever. And at the same time, residents from neighboring countries might feel that, well, in Germany, that's more open to movement, more open to having a holiday in Germany. That's, I think, why these restrictions are being imposed now. One does not want to risk that the achievements, that the progress that's been made in recent weeks is in some way, lost quickly this weekend, this Easter weekend.
Hans, looking at the German economy, the government has already paid out billions in aid to businesses and further billions are promised. Yet today, even more aid was announced. Why?
Yes, this concerns a special section of the companies, small and medium companies, who are not entitled to direct support from the government, direct payments from the government. They have to apply for soft loans from their banks, and these loans are guaranteed by the German state. And apparently there has been some reluctance by banks who have to take some of the risk for these loans, by banks actually to approve these loans. A lot of companies who have made applications seem not to be able to push them through as quickly as possible. So the German state has now said that it will take over the entire risk for such soft loans, and is then encouraging the banks with these new measures to try and speed up the process so that businesses can get money quickly.
Our political correspondent Hans Brandt, thank you. Lockdowns, surveillance, even arrests. EU governments are taking a host of measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. Such restrictions on civil liberties are deemed a matter of life and death now. But activists worry that when the crisis is over, emergency measures could become long-term fixtures.
This is Europe under lockdown. Measures that are unprecedented in peacetime are now in place to combat COVID-19.
We have seen across Europe governments and across the world indeed implementing measures that even a month ago would have been unimaginable to many of us.
Some already fear that the measures could outlast the coronavirus crisis.
What is a big question is when this whole thing ends, what we will be left with.
Europe's 750 million residents have already seen their right to freedom of movement heavily restricted. Breaking the rules can mean fines. People diagnosed with COVID-19 in Italy, for example, could face prison time if they break quarantine. Other measures being taken around Europe are less visible. Mobile carriers are sharing data with health authorities in countries like Italy, Germany and Austria to help authorities monitor whether people are following rules. The data is anonymized, but a data leak at Austria's health ministry website has already raised privacy concerns. Many European leaders are stressing that the new measures are limited in time.
An initial period of 30 days.
For at least 15 days, after Easter. But one country is heading down a more radical path, Hungary. The country's parliament has endorsed a bill giving nationalist Prime Minister Viktor Orbán the power to indefinitely extend the state of emergency and rule by decree.
It's kind of suspicious. Why can't they say, okay guys, I need, 3 months now. After 3 months we can get together and see whether it's justified to prolong it.
Meanwhile, another EU country, France, offers an example of how emergency measures can stick around longer than anticipated. After the terror attacks in Paris in 2015, the government declared a state of emergency. NGOs have criticized the fact that these exceptional powers were later written into law. Experts say the corona crisis calls for emergency measures, but watchdogs are urging caution. One of the UN special rapporteurs tweeted, "We may survive the health crisis, but if we don't tend to our democracies, we have lost the war."
Well, have we? I'm now joined by Katarina Barley. She's a former Minister of Justice here in Germany and currently one of the Vice Presidents of the European Parliament. Do you agree with the statement we just heard? Can some of the emergency measures that are being introduced now amount to a threat to democracy?
Absolutely. And the examples were well chosen, especially Hungary. There already was the possibility to rule by decree for the head of government, but you had to come back to the parliament after 15 days and have the measures confirmed by the parliament. And the opposition even offered to extend this to 30 days. They would have probably said 60 days too, but Orbán insisted on an indefinite prolongation. And that, of course, raises a lot of concerns regarding what he has done before and regarding that there is still a state of emergency out of 2015, the refugee crisis, whereas we know that Hungary doesn't welcome any refugees, and it is still in place since 2015.
Well, you said you're concerned about what Orbán is doing in Hungary, but what's the EU's reaction to that?
Well, the parents of the European Union did not foresee that even two member states could get into conflict with the European values. So we do have the Article 7 procedure, but it has to end with a unanimous decision by all the other member states. Now, having Poland supporting Hungary, this won't get us any further. So at the moment, the only weapon that we have is the European Court of Justice, which is doing its job. But we do need more measures, especially financial ones.
You mentioned Poland there supporting Hungary. Is there appetite among other EU countries to leave some of the measures in place even when the crisis is over?
Yes, this is not only something that is specific to the new illiberal democracies, as they call them. This is something that governments tend to do to keep power to themselves that they have taken from the government. So we have to be aware of this in all the member states. And anyway, we, as a European Union, are going to introduce a rule of law mechanism to do a monitoring every year, and we will have a very close look at this specifically.
Well, looking at the EU on the whole, it still seems there is no real coordinated approach. In Italy, anger is mounting over the lack of solidarity among EU states. Has the EU failed in tackling this crisis?
No, the EU was late to start. I admit that. It should have been a lot earlier to gather the heads of government. But you have to admit that the European Union itself does not have very many competences in these fields of health, of education, of security, of social systems. So you can't ask for the European Union to act, but not give it the competences necessary. We have to talk about what we actually want the European Union to be and to do after this crisis is over, and then to give it the competences it needs therefore.
So how would you rate the EU's coronavirus response? You're quite happy with it?
No, as I said, it started too late, but then the European Union mainly can coordinate. That is what they are doing at the moment. There are common acquisitions for medical devices, for medical material. There are measures concerning the common market. There are measures concerning the finances, for most of all. But as I said, especially concerning the social systems, concerning health, I think we really need more competences. If not, the EU is only a coordinator.
Katarina Barley, Vice President of the EU Parliament, talking to us from her home. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Well, we're staying in the UK, where the coronavirus had not only shut down much of the country, but also seen a boom in conspiracy theories. One that's been growing on social media networks is a belief that 5G mobile phone technology is somehow linked to this outbreak. In Britain, it's led to some phone transmission masts being vandalized and even set on fire. Our reporter Alex Forrest-Whiting joins me now with more on that. Alex, tell us more about these attacks.
Yes, as you say, a number of phone masts across the UK have been targeted in recent weeks, and particularly at the end of last week, with some set on fire, filmed and put on social media websites such as Twitter. And there have also been reports of engineers who've been trying to lay fibre optic cables being harassed on the streets and accused of killing people. Now, you may wonder, what is the link between 5G technology and the coronavirus? Well, there are some unsubstantiated claims that radiation comes from this technology, that it can hurt people's health and that it can lower people's immune systems. Now, that has been the case, people have thought, ever since mobile technology first came on the scene. It's been discredited. But since the coronavirus, the pandemic has really hit all of us across the world, this conspiracy theory has really found a life of its own, particularly focused on the fact that Wuhan, which was at the epicenter of the outbreak in China, was the city where the 5G technology was really tested.
That's quite a stretch, actually. What's been the response to all this?
Well, probably not surprisingly, nonsense from the British government. They've said these are completely unsubstantiated claims, and also from health officials, including the World Health Organization, who've said actually these conspiracy theories are very dangerous because emergency services are relying on phone technology to help everyone, particularly in this crisis. There's been a lot of pressure yet again on social media companies to try to make sure this content is not seen on their websites. Only recently, we heard from Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, who said, and I quote, that Facebook will remove false claims and conspiracy theories that have been flagged by leading global health organizations. But you don't need to look far to find them. On Facebook, you can find these anti-5G groups, and many of the posts are linked directly to COVID-19.
Alex Forrest-Whiting reporting from Britain there. Thank you. Now let's get you the latest on other developments related to the global coronavirus pandemic. Almost 1.3 million people have been infected with the virus worldwide. That's almost twice as many as just 1 week ago. More than 70,000 have died. Austria is set to start loosening its coronavirus lockdown. Chancellor Sebastian Kurz announced that smaller shops could reopen next week. Restaurants and hotels would follow in May. Romania extends its state of emergency by another 30 days beyond current measures, set to end next week. The country has so far confirmed more than 4,000 cases. Russia's caseload jumped by almost 1,000 in 24 hours. Moscow remains the epicenter of the outbreak. 47 people have died across the country.